women bear a lot of shame that we don't have to bear. It's not ours to bear. To enjoy my body is changing. I'm in my 50s now. I don't look the way I used to look, and that's okay. The boy says he wants you to send him nude pictures. You better believe he's not the only one's going to see that picture. I told both my daughters that I wanted them to get on birth control.
This work, whether it's your brand, story, beliefs, or business, is about unbecoming who you were told to be and remembering who the fuck you actually are. It is about reclaiming your voice, standing in your mana power, and building a life rooted in your whakapapa, the story of how you belong to everything which came before you and that will come after you. We are not simply building brands here. We are breaking inherited patterns and building generations. If that's the kind of work that you are seeking, follow the podcast so you do not miss what comes next. You are with Lilia Tarawa on Brand Breaker. Kia ora everyone, I've got an amazing guest for you today, a woman with a powerful story of breaking apart her identity and putting it back together piece by piece. Janice's book, Divorcing Religion, reached #1 in 7 Amazon categories. Her YouTube channel features hundreds of videos with interviews from the likes of Margaret Atwood. Janice Selbie is a Master Practitioner Clinical Counsellor, specialising in religious trauma. She's an author and an international speaker. She's the founder of the Conference on Religious Trauma and the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm just tickled to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us some of your background growing up in conservative religion. I'd love to hear how you got into it or what your experience inside of religion was like.
Sure. Yes. Well, I'm very happy to be joining you today from the unceded ancestral traditional grounds of the Okanagan Syilx people in what's now known as Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. And much of my story took place here. Born into a Pentecostal family, I was the youngest child, and my parents didn't grow up terribly religious when they were traveling around the world. And I think actually it was in New Zealand that they came upon Plymouth Brethren people outdoors doing whatever, witnessing stuff. And so that's when religion really entered their lives. And my dad was quite a blustery, charismatic, impulsive, emotionally volatile person. Mm. And so what he said went, it was my way or the highway. And so we grew up attending church and believing or being taught at least that the Bible was the true inerrant word of God, that it was all literal, that all the miracles and everything really happened. And of course, then that we were in danger of going to hell if we disagreed. One by one, my older siblings all kind of saw through it and walked away. But as the youngest, what I saw was how that hurt my parents. And so I decided I was going to be the one that stuck with it, the very good girl.
Right.
And then I ended up going to Pentecostal church and eventually being baptized in the Holy Spirit, which if folks don't know, for me and my group, that meant I could speak in tongues. And it made me feel like I had a very close relationship with my deity. And then eventually my pastor introduced me. He and his wife had me over for dinner. There was me and 3 single young men from the young adults group. So I was pretty aware of what was going on. And I selected the person that was the most cerebral, I would say. He seemed very intelligent and definitely loved Jesus, and he was tall. And those were things that were important to me. I wouldn't say our personalities really were natural for each other to be together, but so that didn't matter because we wanted to get married. It's better to marry than to burn with passion was what we were taught. And so we got married. And then he wanted to become a theologian and professor at a Bible college. So we moved away to a conservative Bible college in Alberta. That's when I encountered this group of women. And these women would come in always wearing very modest dresses and with their head coverings on. And I said to my husband at the time, my ex-husband, now I call him my husband. I said to him, who are ladies? Are they Amish? I've never seen that before. And he said, no, they're not Amish. They're a particular brand of Mennonite. And actually how they're dressing is biblical according to the New Testament. So my husband never said to me, you must adopt that conservative way of dressing. But remember, I mentioned earlier on that my dad was quite volatile emotionally. So I really gravitated towards rules and was quite a rule follower. I felt safe. If I knew the rules, then maybe I wouldn't get, say, into as much trouble from my dad or any authority figure. And so when I read that in the New Testament, that there were rules about how women were supposed to dress, I couldn't believe that someone had been holding out on me, that there were these rules that I didn't know about. So I immediately got rid of all my pants and anything like that, just kept long skirts and dresses and started covering my hair, and decided our daughters would never have their hair cut and they would have to dress, like me. And I really felt like I was being so obedient. And I never told other people, other women, that they had to do it. The people on the Bible college saw me becoming radicalized in this way, but nobody said anything. They were, I think, pretty uncomfortable about it. But also just saying, well, she's on her path. She's on her spiritual path. And if this is what she feels like God's telling her to do, then so be it. So eventually my husband said to me, Jan, you're making your circle smaller and smaller. How small will you make it? And that he was so wise in that. He really had an insight. All I cared about was holiness. I have to be holy. And being holy means we had to get rid of the TV channels, and we couldn't have any secular influences in the house. No books, no radios, no anything like that. Everything became all Christian all the time. That's what it was like. And of course, then I was also homeschooling my daughters. So things got pretty fundamentalist pretty fast. Fast forward a few years, and he wasn't able to complete his Bible college degree for financial reasons. And so he decided to go into ministry and be a pastor, which I knew was just going to be terrible because I felt he didn't have the temperament for it. We went through many difficult years, and the relationship was difficult as well. And then our final year when we were pastoring was just such a hard time. And my parents split up after about, 40 years or so together. And the church was failing. And then the last piece for me that year was that my youngest nephew had killed someone back in our hometown in Kelowna, and he had gone on the run. And so I was contacted by the RCMP, that's our Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they told me if he showed up that I would have to turn him in. It was just a huge amount of pressure. So we ended up leaving the pastorate, moving back to our hometown, but the horrible calamities kept coming. The last nail in the coffin of my religious belief was when our youngest daughter was diagnosed with a life-threatening, lifelong illness. We were terrified. What's going to happen? Can we navigate this? Is she going to survive? And then I was walking by her bedroom one night, and she was praying that God would forgive her if she did anything bad that gave her this disease. And so could he just take it away? And I thought, that is it. That is it. I've tried everything I could to be a godly woman. And I mean, maybe I've just bet on the wrong horse in the race. Maybe there's a God out there somewhere, but he is not in Christianity. Why would he cause such distress to my precious, innocent, sweet child? And in that moment, I gave myself permission to start exploring other beliefs and philosophies. And it was very messy, Lilia. It wasn't, I wasn't the only person impacted. Impacted my kids, it impacted their dad. You lose your identity, your worldview, your community. It was very rough going for a few years.
So how did you survive through this? You've lost everything. Your daughter's been diagnosed with this illness. You've gone through bankruptcy. You've had these horrible life experiences. How did you survive and get through that to come out the other side?
I did at one point recognize that I was veering into suicidality. And so I went to my doctor when I recognized that when the doctor was going through a checklist with me. And she said, is there anything that you can think of, any reason why you should not follow through with your plan? And I said, my children. My children were the thing that prevented me from taking that final step. So I'm very grateful for my kids. I started exploring, as I mentioned, other philosophies. I relinquished my fear of hell, my belief in hell, very early on. That wasn't nearly as hard as when then I also thought, oh gosh, well, maybe heaven's not real either. That was far more painful and disturbing to me. But so having this other interest and this new freedom and this curiosity that I was suddenly allowed to have, I think that was a lifeline for me. Also, reaching out to some friends from when I was a child, before I got so religious, because I went to public school. These people had an idea of who I was before my brain was really hijacked, my identity was really hijacked. So connecting with them also allowed some sort of healing.
You're sort of in this place questioning it, but what takes you from there to actively pursuing a career in it?
I had been working for a number of years at our local hospital doing medical transcription. And then I took a job at a business college training students to do that. But I was deeply unhappy there. I knew it wasn't the right fit for me. What I was really interested in were people's stories. I want to be able to do more than just hear people's stories. I want to be able to help them and to work with them. And at that time, I wasn't even aware of religious trauma. I'd never heard of religious trauma. But so I went back to school to get my education to be a counselor. I'm taking my college courses, learning about counseling. And then I'm learning about PTSD. And I'm thinking, oh, I have PTSD. But I thought it was just from my dad, from living with a volatile, authoritarian male. But the more I thought about it, the more I recognized patterns and that religion, patriarchy was all wrapped up in there. And I started learning about cults. And the more I explored people talking about their experiences with cults, I was like, I don't think I was in a cult, but gee, all of these, I can tick all these boxes. And then I didn't know what to type in the computer. I'd sit in front of the computer and I didn't know, the word deconstruction or deconversion. And then one day, finally, a video came up and it was this woman, United States psychologist, Dr. Marlene Winnell. And Dr. Winnell is a pioneer in the field of religious trauma and recovery. And I just started to cry because she was speaking words that I didn't have. She was saying what my experience was. So I immediately found her contact information, reached out to her, sobbed over the phone my story to her. And she said, well, I'm hosting a retreat in San Francisco. Come on over and see what you think. And then I was terrified that what if it's a cult? I don't know anybody there. Maybe something awful's going to happen. But I just felt so compelled. Dr. Winnell, Marlene, she became a dear friend and a mentor. And it was my connection with her that really got me thinking about the significance of religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome and how it's not widely spoken of. And it's very pervasive, can go into every corner of our life because it informed our identity and our thoughts and our worldview. So that's when I started really leaning into religious trauma for my career. And it's working out.
Can you tell me, when you were deconstructing yourself and you were coming from this place of absolute devotion, piety, reverence, what were the top 3 things that really helped you to break away from that as you started to question?
The first thing for sure was the injustice of seeing my innocent, precious child afflicted with a terrible disease. After I had gone out of my way, like literally tried to live a biblical life, I went to a used bookstore across the street and I thought, I want to find a book in here about other religions. But I was terrified, not just that someone would see me, but that God would see me and he would smite me. And then I think along with that came the whole rejection of men being superior to women simply because they have an additional body part. That, I never did buy wholly into that. Even when I started wearing a head covering, part of the reason I did that was because, as I mentioned, my relationship was challenging with my husband. And I hoped that when I wore this head covering, it would just remind me to submit and to zip my lip and stop, saying anything. I really was trying to become less of me and hide myself altogether. And so that people wouldn't even see me, they would only see God.
What I'm hearing you say is the things that sort of started to break that apart for you was 1, injustice, 2, curiosity, and 3, inequality of the sexes. What are the things that really changed you, real moments for you when you felt yourself really leaving or really even claiming back a piece of yourself?
I was still in my first marriage, and my spouse, he was seeing all this deconstruction going on, and he was trying to ride it out. I was getting tattoos, and I was, I'm sorry for the misappropriation, but I grew dreadlocks. It was like night and day. I went from being so tightly wound to having no rules at all. And part of that, then I eventually said, I need permission to explore relationships with other women because I'm not getting what I need from this relationship. And then another one, I just love this memory. I had moved in with another man that I met, and we were together for 2 or 3 years. He had a hot tub you could sit in. And so I was in my bikini, and I had taken a substance that I hadn't used before, but I decided I would deny myself nothing, and I denied myself nothing. And then I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I'm going back and forth, and I'm looking, and tears just start streaming down my face, and I'm yell for my partner that I'm living with, come here. And I said, look at me, and I'm pointing in the mirror. I said, am I allowed to swear on your show? I
said,
look at me.
Do not deny yourself.
That's right. I said, I'm so fucking beautiful. And that was the first time in my life that I ever loved the person that I saw looking back at me, because we get so many messages as women told that we're not lovable. I wish I could bottle that and share it with all of your viewers, because it was such a powerful experience for me. Then when I moved in the direction of working specifically with people recovering from religious trauma, and I came to the conclusion that I was no longer a Christian, and it took me years to say it even out loud because I was terrified, because of course you don't want to deny Christ. But one time I was watching Star Trek. The episode was touching on evolution, and I still didn't believe evolution at all. I only believed creation. And so I made some comment to my partner at that time about how could anyone believe evolution. And he was shocked because, he saw it as scientific. And he said to me, well, what do you believe? And then I was like, I don't even know. I don't even know what I believe. I was being very honest. And so that, led me a little farther down the road to recognize, I don't have to hold on to these beliefs. They're no longer important to me, and I do not believe them.
That's such an amazing story. What age were you when you were looking in the mirror at yourself in a bikini saying, I am so fucking beautiful?
Yeah, I was 42. I was 42. I was religious for, the first 4 decades of my life. I saw myself infinitely loved by God, who was my father, all these kinds of things. But that doesn't factor in now because I don't believe that God exists anymore. But I see myself as a compassionate, curious, intelligent woman who wants to make the world a better place.
What I wanted to ask is, as a woman, what were the things that you were denying yourself inside of your conservative faith? And what do you now allow yourself to have as someone who's deconstructed those beliefs?
Definitely, I denied myself the recognition that I am a curious person and an intelligent person, because I believed everything that I wanted or thought had to go through a filter. It had to pass through the God filter, the Bible filter, my husband filter, because certainly I could not have a reasonable thought on my own. I had to, run it through these filters first. I never thought I was smart or overly intelligent. It was only within the last few years that a partner said to me, "You're really smart." And I was like, "I am?" It's like, it felt like this big shock, never to have heard that. And then I thought back through the years and I thought, yes, I am. I am this, and I can claim this for myself. I rejected my own power. This new my life has been me taking up residence within myself and residing in my own personal power.
When you say residing in my own personal power on a day-to-day basis, how does that mean you show up for yourself?
Making decisions about my work, accepting when I have made a mistake, because I've never been this age before and I've never done this before, giving myself permission to enjoy my life, to enjoy my body. My body is changing. I'm in my 50s now. I don't look the way I used to look, and that's okay. I'm allowed to be me, and I'm allowed to enjoy being in this body. But I'm not living under the feeling like I'm under a camera, under a microscope. That was hard, being a pastor's wife, because you're in a fishbowl. Even when I left Christianity, being a public figure on social media, you're going to get people who don't like what you're doing, people who want to just destroy your happiness, whatever it is. So I give myself permission not to care what those people think.
I completely understand your perspective of a fishbowl, because as the granddaughter of the church leader, it was very much the same. You had to be held at a standard much higher than anyone else. And so it creates this idea of you have to be perfect in everything that you do. And as a woman coming into my own power, it's been about giving myself permission to be messy and be in the mess, and it's allowed to not look perfect, and I'm allowed to make mistakes. So I absolutely love that you've shared that.
Oh, yeah.
I was curious, why do you believe that sexuality and being able to have complete control and autonomy over our bodies is so important for women?
Because we are, unfortunately, swimming in the sea of patriarchy. I think it is really important that we do recognize our own autonomy and agency. I'm deeply concerned for my sisters in the United States right now. I see their rights being repealed as Christian nationalism engulfs the country. And my clients tell me, they say, I managed to extricate myself from Christianity, but now it's chasing me down the street. That's how they feel. So yeah, I think it's imperative that girls and women understand that their bodies are their own, that they are in charge. I told both my daughters that I wanted them to get on birth control, and they were in their teens, and they were saying, I'm not even having sex. I said, that's fine, but I want you to be prepared. If the opportunity comes up and you feel like it's something you want to explore, I don't want you to have to worry about getting pregnant or getting an STD or an STI. So I really became very transparent and vocal with them. Just a few years later, when one daughter was in their 20s and they were going to see a medical specialist about something, and they asked if I'd accompany them on the visit. And so we're both sitting in the doctor's office, and the male specialist said to my daughter, your mom can leave. She doesn't have to be here for this. And she looked at him and said, why would I ever want my mom to leave? She can know what's going on with my body. And I felt so privileged in that moment. And
how affirming.
Yes. And then, of course, I wrote my book, Divorcing Religion, a Memoir and Survival Handbook, and I put things in that book that do not paint me in the most beautiful light. I put nitty-gritty things, choices I made in that book that harmed people, and choices that I made, being sexual after the marriage ended. And I thought, I'm not ashamed. What I see is growth. I want other people to know it's possible that they can grow and change too. And when we tell the truth, nobody can hold things over us. Nobody can threaten
Yeah.
us. I'll tell this about you. I already told him myself. It's okay. And so, yes, really encouraging young people also to be mindful about the internet being forever when it comes to sexuality. So even having really frank conversations with my daughters in their teens, if a boy says he wants you to send him nude pictures, you better believe he's not the only one who's going to see that picture. It's going to go all over the internet. So don't send pictures of yourself that you don't want anyone to see. And of course, now AI, deep fakes, there's all sorts of stuff going on. But I am proud of the women that my daughters have become. And they are women of agency. They're directing their own lives.
How gorgeous. When it comes to shame, women carry a lot of shame around their bodies. We get a lot of messaging from society about how we should look and what is okay and what's not okay. For you, where did that shame come from?
I think largely from growing up in a Christian family in the 1970s. So they didn't call it purity culture. It was just the expectation that I would not be having sex until I was married. And so then when I didn't, because when I was 19, I was in a relationship. And finally, when I said, you know what, I think I'm ready to take this next step and we can have sex. Then when he ended the relationship a few months later or within a year of that, all of the messaging came back to me. You know, my mom would say when I was a teenager, why would a man buy the cow when he can get the milk for free? Which means don't give away, you know, all that good shit and those things. And then, of course, the things
I'm cringing over here.
Yeah, oh, yeah. And youth pastors saying, oh, you're going to be like chewed gum or, you know, a used Kleenex or whatever if you have sex. All of those things just came back so powerfully. And I despised myself. And I became a barfly. I thought no man's ever going to want me. No one's ever going to want me. I was at the bar every night. I was drinking a lot. I was just trying to make myself, telling myself I was still desirable if any drunk at the bar wanted me to go home with them. And that was, you know, a painful time. Women bear a lot of shame that we don't have to bear. It's not ours to bear. We need to, when someone tries to give it to us, says, here, I think you should have this shame. No, that's your shame. That's not my shame. I don't have to feel shame about that. But that can take a lot of time.
Yeah, and the point where we feel safe enough to like bite back.
Yes.
And to fight back and hit back and not, you know, not take it anymore. It's very different to live through something versus now tell that experience to the world on a very public stage, to write about it, to speak about it. For you, was it difficult to tell your story? And what helped you gain the courage to actually begin to show the world who you truly were and what you'd lived through?
Yes, it was difficult, especially writing anything in my memoir about the rest of my family, because I didn't want to hurt them. In the end, I decided it's my story and I'm going to tell it. I did get their permission for any photos. I put some childhood photos of us in there, and they were all in favor of that. But yeah, 2020 was a year for a lot of people that was a terrifying year because that was the first year of the pandemic. It also happened to be my partner at the time left me and took my money. I'd been setting up the first conference on religious trauma. It was supposed to happen in 2020. He set up my website and the payment system, and I trusted him. We were living together, and he had funneled it. So all the money was going into his account. And then when I told him, I think I'm going to have to postpone the conference. I'm going to have to start refunding people. And he said, well, we're done. I'm out of here. And that was such a huge shock. And then I found out he wasn't even divorced. He had another family across the country. It was just the dissolution of everything that I thought was real again. And it was so terrifying. And then that's when I started writing the memoir, was that year. It took me 4 years to write the whole thing. Sometimes I had to stop and put it down because it hurt so much, the things I was remembering and the stories I was telling. But eventually it was ready, and I just thought, here we go. We'll see what the world has to say about this.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been through so much, but somehow you've managed to take those difficult experiences and instead of being like, well, these have defeated me, you're instead saying, well, these are the experiences that are forging me, which is so powerful. And I just am so honored to have you speaking here today and sharing with my audience. When it comes to growing your business and publishing your book and telling your story, if you had any piece of advice for those who are looking to do the same and build a bold brand that's truly who they are without the way that society's told them to be, what's the one piece of advice that you would give people?
I would say do some research, but really believe in yourself and recognize how your message could help other people. Do they have a problem and you have a possible solution for the problem? Get it out there. The world needs to be receiving solutions for painful problems. And if you've lived through it and you've had an experience to share, don't hold back. You get to share your experience as yourself.
Amazing. Thank you so much to everyone who has listened. Absolutely loved having you on the show to share your story. All the links to Janice's social platforms and her books are on the show notes, so you can go there if you want to follow her. Aside from that, thank you for being here and listening along with us.
Oh, what a pleasure and what an honor. Thank you for having me.